you said that the Eucharist, they did believe at this point in time that it was transformed into the actual blood and actual body of Jesus Christ?
It does not appear that that was the case. What I was trying to suggest is that later on in the Middle Ages, when people will argue that, they go back to some of the words of these second century Christians. And will, so they're written in this vague kind of way so that people are able to take them and say, look, these early Christians believed, right, way back then. So this, and since they're closer to the apostles, this must have been true. But it's not a very clear, when Justin says, right, talk about taking the Eucharist, he doesn't say the bread and the wine become the body and the blood. He says they're no longer common food. Right? That doesn't have to mean that Justin thought he's not eating bread, he's eating the actual body. Other questions or other places to clarify? Let's move on into the 3rd century then. And in the 3rd century, we begin to see even more development, particularly because of the different types of situations that were developing in the 3rd century. Specifically, when we think of the political situation, we find ourselves observing a lot more persecution in the 3rd century than what we've seen in the 2nd century. I want to highlight a few of the emperors, the Roman emperors of the time, and talk about some of their policies, because as we see throughout the 3rd century, we'll see more and more emphasis on, or more existence of empire-wide types of persecution. Still sporadic, but much more widespread than what we saw in the 2nd century. One of the earliest emperors to talk about in this case is a man named Septimus Severus. And like previous generations before him, Severus was really concerned with how religion influenced politics. And so for Severus, religion and politics were very closely tied together. Believing, as he did, that if you united the world religiously, you would unite them politically. Now, how do you do that when there's such a diversity, even within the Roman Empire, over what gods are worshipped? Well, Severus began to emphasize more of it's not really monotheism, but more of a henotheism. Henotheism refers to a situation of multiple gods being recognized, but one deity above all of those. And Sol Invictus was that deity. Other deities were tolerated, you could still worship them, but you had to give your ultimate allegiance to Sol Invictus. I know we've asked before about people knowing the Greek. This is Latin, so I won't press it. Sol Invictus means the unconquered sun. Right? So the sun god. So there's still this toleration, but an expectation that you'll place Sol Invictus over all the other deities. Well, Christians and Jews certainly could not hold to that. There are no other gods to begin with, let alone trying to put Sol Invictus over the God of the Bible. And so Severus outlawed conversions to Christianity, outlaws conversions to Judaism. Not that there were ever large numbers of converts to Judaism, but it did sometimes take place. In his persecution, which was widespread but not truly empire-wide, Severus focused on new converts and teachers. Right? People that were recognized publicly as teachers and people that were new converts. Why focus on those two groups? Yeah, I mean, if you focus, you're not gonna have growth if people aren't teaching and people aren't joining. Why else might you focus on those two groups? Okay, frightening away other people from converting. What else might be easier to do with new converts? Right? Since they're new, they're not going to have all the commitment to Christianity like people that have been in the religion for several decades. So go after the new converts because they might be the ones that more easily pluck off. And of course, as we've talked about the teachers, if you get rid of the teachers, then people can't spread the message. Well, we understand that that's not truly going to work because if those teachers are taken out, other teachers are going to arise. But this is the way Severus is looking at it, right? You focus on these two groups, and that will end Christianity as well. After Severus's reign, it was kind of hit or miss with persecution. A lot of it depended upon region. A lot of it depended upon the governmental officials of the time. And so largely persecution was very, very limited between the beginning of the 3rd century and towards the middle of the 3rd century, when Decius became emperor. In many respects, if we're going to be fair to Decius, we would have to say that he's not really cruel. He's not doing it from some sort of cruelty or some standpoint of, he's trying to hurt everybody or anybody. But what's happened with Decius is that Rome has been on the decline for several years when he becomes emperor. And he believes that this decline has been because people haven't been paying attention to the Roman gods. And so it's out of this motivation that ultimately Decius will persecute Christians. But Decius particularly wants to have apostates, not martyrs. Why would apostates be more useful for Decius than martyrs? I mean, kill them off, right? Why look for people to fall away from the faith? Try to make people fall away or turn away from the faith instead of just killing them.
Maybe if people fell away, then it would make the faith look like it wasn't really worth following. If people died for it, it looked like it's something real.
Yeah, the falling away or turning away, it looks more like a fad, right? Okay, people were interested in it a while, but look at all those people leaving. But if you have a martyr to a cause, it's easier for that person to kind of be a rallying point, right? And encourages people to check it out. What else might apostasy do? Right? Kind of discourage people from joining because there are people leaving it.
Maybe if they leave the Christian faith, they would go to the worship the Roman God.
Right? So it's not just leaving, they'll kind of, they'll join our side too, might be a way to look at it. What else would apostasy do? We've talked about how it would have an effect on outsiders.
Maybe someone who fell away could be a person that others who hadn't fallen away trusted, and if they saw that they fell away, thought, well, they respected that person. Well, if I respect their opinion and they're doing this, maybe I should follow that.
Yeah, it's not just to kind of prevent outsiders from coming in. It also might dishearten the people that were in, right? And dishearten Christians of, wow, that person seemed like they were really committed, and or that person, I really respected their ideas and respected their faith, and now they've left. So it becomes disheartening. Where if you're killing them off, it becomes a rallying point of people to get stronger, right? And so Decius said, let's get apostates, not martyrs. And one of the ways that he did this was through the requiring of people in his empire to sacrifice to the gods. It became a requirement that everyone must sacrifice. And once a person did sacrifice, they received a libellus, plural Latin libellae. Essentially, a libellus was a statement that an individual had sacrificed to the gods. Several of these documents have been discovered from the time of Decius. About 40 to 45 have been found in archaeological digs. Here's just an example of one of those, what was said on a libellus, probably a copy someone would have had. To those superintending the sacrifices of the village of Theodelphia, from Aurelia Bellius, daughter of Pteres, and her daughter Capinus. And so these are the two people that have sacrificed, Aurelia Bellius and Capinus. We have sacrificed to the gods all along, and now in your presences, according to the orders, I poured a libation and sacrificed and tasted of the sacred offerings, and I request you to subscribe this for us. Right, so this is a statement from these two women that they have sacrificed. And in fact, they claim that they sacrificed their entire lives. Signed, or the witnesses here, are Aurelius Serenus and Aurelius Hermas, and it's signed by Hermas. The date, year one of the emperor Decius. Right? These emperors truly had all these huge names: Caesar, Gaius, Messius, Quintus, Trajanus, Decius, Pius, Felix, Augustus. Pawnee 27 would have been around June. Right, and so June the 27th. And so there are several of these libelli, like I said, that have been discovered, and they pretty much say the same thing. Right? It's an indication of sacrificing to the gods. We'll talk more about Decius' persecution because it does have a profound effect on Christians in several places. Again, there's some break between the time of Decius and others. Valerian would bring up new persecution. But after Valerian's reign, there were several years of peace before the reign of Diocletian. Diocletian's reign spans the last part of the 3rd century into the 4th century, and so we'll talk a little bit about Diocletian as well. A couple of things to share about Diocletian's reign that will come up later. Diocletian decides to break the empire into two separate regions, west and east. And in that, he extends these levels of rulers. Each region would have a Caesar and an Augustus. Right? And so two levels of authority. The plan largely was the Caesar would become the next Augustus when Augustus died. Overall, this Diocletian is kind of the ultimate authority. It is troubles within the army, that brings Christians to the attention of Diocletian. Evidently, there are conversions in the army at this time, suggesting there were Christians in the army. But this turmoil leads to execution in the army, leads to removal of Christians from positions of power within the government. And Diocletian kind of gets very paranoid about what Christians are doing to his empire. And so he has them imprisoned, he has them tortured, sometimes even put to death. At the root of this is a man named Galerius, who serves as the Caesar under Diocletian. He will eventually become an Augustus. And so Galerius kind of doesn't really care for Christians, and so he's kind of fomenting this persecution some, really hyping up to Diocletian what these Christians represent for his reign. What questions about persecution politics in the 3rd century here? So we're ending the 3rd century on this note of widespread persecution that will pick up as we move into the 4th century.
Just a question about the Augusti and the Caesars. How is it? What would happen if said there was a Caesar over each region, and then there was only one Augustus?
Well, there were two Augusti. There was one in the east, one in the west. The Diocletian, who was one of the Augusti, was the top guy, right? And
So he pretty much broke it up where there were two separate governments completely?
not completely, but pretty close to it, right? And so he's kind of dividing it regionally, but he's still the head guy, right?
And
And so
I guess one of the two would be, I guess, authority over the other, or?
yes.
Okay.
Other questions?